I realised after posting the video yesterday that when I was talking about working with the most powerful gang members in the group and assisting them to deal with sit with their vulnerability, that came as a result of quite a lot of uh, relationship work. And what I mean by that is, as a therapist, creating an environment for people who have suffered a lot of emotional neglect and abuse as children, it behoves us to create an environment where there is safety. Now, we kind of determine we've got a strange idea about safety and love, that it's all lovey lovey, dovey dovey. But safety actually also means that when someone is intellectualizing or putting down someone else or um, avoiding engaging, safety means that the therapist is prepared to challenge that. Just like, when we're challenging these authority figures in the government and globally, um, we have to be prepared to challenge that. And that's probably the biggest factor that I see is absent in working with particularly men who are violent, is in people who are therapists who still hold some of their own um, beliefs about themselves not being okay, and so they're unwilling to challenge people who will try and uh, push those buttons. And as therapists, if we're going to be working at this really hard end, um, we have to be prepared to go there, not just for the lower status men in the group, to help them not be picked on as the scapegoat to do all the emotional work for the group, but also for the men themselves, just like when little children actually desperately need boundaries to feel safe. So they need to know that the adult is kind of saying, actually, no, that's not okay, that behaviour towards your big brother. But when the adult in the room, the equivalent of perhaps the parent who the younger child provokes the older child, and instead of inquiring into it or understanding what's really going on and naming that actually you poked him first. It's not okay what he did to you, but you started it. And so, in that way, that child learns that actually not only is it not okay to do that, but that you notice, because part of it is sussing out how safe this environment is for them. And it's the same with um, men who have been abused in children's homes and Borstal, and all sorts of terrible things have happened to them as children, which they then go on to perpetrate pretty heinous things themselves. But we have to first show them that these are the boundaries, and what that also demonstrates to the group is that we can tolerate a level of experimentation with feelings that normally people would suppress. And when I look at people doing therapy online, it's great what they're doing. It's very good in in providing accessibility for people who don't have access to counselling to um, maybe have their story mirrored back to them. But what I don't see happening is actually the activation of the outrage in the child towards the parent. And in therapy, the therapist or the group facilitator is the projection of that, because we are largely responsible for creating the culture, just like in a family, a parent is responsible for creating a culture. And when we have a leaky culture, everyone feels anxious. So the the big thing in helping people who have kind of believe this narcissistic behaviour is them have to have an experience of first being validated for what they've went through, so their story, but they also have to have boundaries um, in the group. And uh, like with any shame, when there is warmth and acceptance and non-judgmental um, presence, it's possible for people to admit to all kinds of things. And what I noticed as the group developed, so we would have an initial stage of building relationship, and part of that will be sharing of stories, and people would have to be coached um, to share really what happened to them. And as their bonds with each other grew and their recognition that they wouldn't be shamed or humiliated in the group, all of them had that fear. Um, People began to confess behaviour that actually wasn't on their criminal record, but they could see that it was an important part of change was to um, own up, own up to the harm, because what we're often not aware of in the media is that these are, people describe offenders in really inhumane terms. What they don't know is that these people have nightmares about what they've done. They feel um, a lot of empathy for their victims, but they're unable to access it, to communicate that to them. And meanwhile, they're locked up in a cell on their own for long periods of time often. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I think um, you also see that in the wider culture. Here in New Zealand, when the protest against the vaccines came to Parliament, and like it was a legitimate protest, had been organised properly, it is quite within the a system of democracy for people to protest. And the government and the parliamentarians wouldn't meet with the protesters. Now, to me, there is something about an inability to maybe admit that you have got some things wrong. And instead of being able to meet with people and hear about the damage that the vaccine had done to people's health, killed some people, um, they stonewalled them. And what that says to me is that we have accepted a culture where we shame people when they make mistakes. And so, of course, people don't want to admit to it. And they will do everything, they'll fight right to the bitter end. Whereas I know from people that I've spoken to that when they're actually finally sentenced, there's just this huge relief about not having to fight it anymore. And we're all part of that. In how we interact on social media. So if we shame someone for making a mistake, or we want to belittle someone, we're contributing to this culture which says actually you can't make a mistake, make reparation, and change. In a way, that's how we treat people who have broken the law reinforces that, because once you have a criminal record, that's it. It's a little bit like once you have a mental health diagnosis, that's it. Forever after, you are mentally unwell. And that's just not true. People change. And but what isn't changing is our culture of accepting that. So I just really feel that one of the things that helps people to own up and therefore to change, it's one of the barriers uh, between recidivism and change, is not being able to own what you've done and to understand how it's happened. So one of the antidotes to that is acceptance, kindness, generosity, compassion, understanding. And that's not to say that you are condoning their behaviour, but what you are saying is you are a human being who has done these things because of these experiences in your life. And had you not had those experiences in your life, your trajectory would have been a very different one. So, anyway, something to think about.